Joining us. So obviously, we've heard Julia lay out this extensive timeline involving these various alleged victims, Jane Does, and there are 6 Jane Does in the charges that are listed out. Obviously, we know by now Aaliyah, the R&B star, is Jane Doe number 1. So the obvious question is, when these jurors are hearing the details of this case, just having that kind of connection that presumably some of them have, presumably some of them know of Aaliyah, how does that impact things?
Well, first of all, they're going to think that he was some kind of a pervert. I mean, let's call it what it is, right? A grown man kind of, throwing himself at young girls and allowing young girls to throw themselves at him is not a good optic for R. Kelly. Now, to be fair, I think the issue for this jury is going to be whether or not this was the product of an enterprise or if it was just the byproduct of his lifestyle, of the rich and famous. I mean, you look at people like Cher. She has a magnificent fortress on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. You look at Michael Jackson, may he rest in peace, who also had, this massive compound, the Neverland Ranch in California, where it would take an act of Congress to get inside. Does that necessarily mean that something nefarious in terms of a RICO enterprise is going on, or is it just poor choices? I think the real issue here is whether or not the statute of limitation has run on some of these state sex charges for which criminal jurisdiction could not attach in federal court. So they're using an end run around it through the RICO statutes, and they're hoping that it will stick.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point that it's one thing for a jury to decide that there was wrongdoing here, and it's another thing for them to decide that there is enough to legally convict this man of racketeering and the slew of other charges. His defense has said from the outset with opening statements that these relationships were consensual. His defense attorney even said long-term and beautiful relationships were among them, and that these alleged victims actually enjoyed the notoriety of being with R. Kelly. So looking at what you've just laid out with the legal challenge that they're going to have to overcome as the prosecution lays out their case, how real are these concerns for jurors?
They're very real. As long as the defense takes them step by step through the law and makes them understand truly what an enterprise is, that it's essentially a business operation, that you're transporting people across state lines for purposes of sex, for purposes of molesting young kids, as opposed to the byproduct of a lifestyle of the rich and famous. And I think that when you sit the jury down and assuming that R. Kelly is likable from afar in the jury box, there may be reasonable doubt. They may have the impression that a lot of these women now are, wannabe starlets who are let down, where, in Hollywood, they say it's where all the dreams are broken. And it could just be they want to have the last word and avenge their anger.
And that is exactly what the defense has been arguing throughout this. Thank you so much, Philip Dube, for your analysis. Of course, we hope to pick your brain on some of the other top legal stories that we're following. Coming up, prosecutors say real estate